Welcome to the real world. My name's Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Real World YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. If you're a movie fan, you're in the right place. Today we are talking all about Stephen King adaptations. So movies based on works by author Stephen King, one of the most prolific horror authors of all time, who's also dabbled in some different genres as well. So a lot of different movies are going to be discussed here. Let's kick things off, though, with some movie news. All right, so kicking things off as we normally do with some movie news. First things up, Australia. The 2008 film by Baz Luhrmann is being turned into a mini-series. The film, of course, stars Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman. It was not very well received when it was originally released, at least financially. Critically, it did fine. But it's being re-edited into a 6-part miniseries now titled Faraway Downs. This will debut in November, and of course will include several hours of cut footage that will now be re-edited into a miniseries. So check this out, coming to Hulu in November. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, one of my favorite films of the year, one of my favorite franchises of all time, has finally been announced that it will arrive on December 5th on the 4K format. Walmart and Best Buy will both have exclusive editions, so make sure you check that out and get those pre-orders in as soon as you can. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is being eyed for a February production start date. This film stars Oscar Isaac, Andrew Garfield, Mia Goth, and Christoph Waltz. So, very excited to see this movie. The filmmaker said it's 50 years in the making, one of his personal favorite films from childhood, one of his favorite stories of all time. So I'm definitely curious to see what this visionary director does with this classic story. Rocketeer 2 gets a screenwriter. Disney is fast-tracking this movie. It's obviously a high priority for them, as the writer's strike has just ended, and they have hired a writer immediately following the writer's strike to pen the script for this follow-up to Rocketeer. David Oyelowo has been attached to this project for a couple of years now. He will star as a Tuskegee Airman who takes up the mantle. The tentative title for the film is The Return of the Rocketeer. Also, Michael Caine announced his retirement at the age of 90. He is done making movies. He just made his final film, which is getting critical acclaim, which is set to debut soon, so be on the lookout for that. Some movie anniversaries this week I wanted to highlight. First one is turning 10 years old, Captain Phillips, one of my favorite Tom Hanks performances. Incredible true story. Really, really worth seeking out if you haven't seen this one. It's a tense thriller, so check that one out. Another one celebrating its 50th anniversary, Terrence Malick's first film, Badlands, starring Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek. One of my favorites from that era and from that director. Very unique, kind of a crime romance movie, if you will. Movies like True Romance and others inspired heavily by this movie, which is loosely based on a true story. So this is the Criterion edition I have here. Definitely worth checking out. And then one of my all-time favorite James Bond movies, From Russia with Love, turned 60 this year. The second film starring Sean Connery, the second James Bond movie ever made, way back in 1963. Definitely an underrated Bond movie. Like I said, one of my favorites, in my top 5 of all time. So definitely worth checking out, From Russia with Love. If you're a Bond fan, or if you're not, you're just into spy movies, this is a great one. All right, folks, well, that's it for movie news. Now it is time to jump into our main topic. As I stated up front, it is Stephen King movie adaptations. So adaptations of this author's books. That should be a lot of fun to talk about. I got to watch several that I hadn't seen before this week. And joining me is Bert. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. What's going on, Cam?
Not much. Ready to talk about some Stephen King movies. It's, of course, October. So it's time for horror month. Not one of my favorite genres personally. I know you're a much bigger fan than I am, so this should be a very unique discussion. I'm very curious to what our top fives are going to look like. Stephen King, of course, he's a 76-year-old author, prolific author, dubbed the King of Horror. And he's written tons of books in that genre, as well as some other genres as well. So it's not going to strictly be horror necessarily the whole podcast here, but Pet Sematary Bloodlines, which is a sort of sequel spinoff to the Pet Sematary franchise, is now in theaters. So that's why we're talking about this author and the adaptations of his books. I've never actually read any Stephen King books, but I've seen many of the films. Like I said, I got to watch several this week, so I've seen many films, adapted from his books, and I'm a fan. I think he's a talented guy. Comes up with some great concepts, and I didn't go too deep into how accurate is the book to the movie. I know fans of his will probably get deep into that kind of stuff, so I didn't go too deep into that. I'm just basing it on the movies I've seen. But Bert, kind of what were your thoughts going into this one?
Yeah, you mentioned genres. It seems like he tends to have like the adaptations tend to be just all out horror or more of like a drama.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? With maybe a little bit of a twist or a little bit of sci-fi or a little bit of horror. So that's interesting. As far as his books, yeah, I've read two of his books. I don't have the biggest attention span with reading. So the two books of his I've read are two of his short story books. So I've
Oh,
actually read a lot of his stories, but short stories.
sure.
And so there's a couple I think that I'll talk about here today that I have actually read the short story of. But so yeah, not really any novels have I sort of nestled into.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, I think we're ready to jump into these lists. We've got several honorable mentions we want to talk about, so let's jump into that now. Alrighty, so starting off with honorable mentions before we jump into our top five favorite Stephen King adaptations. First, I had to mention Cujo. I saw that for the first time this week, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really solid kind of horror film. It wasn't the best. It ranks a little bit lower in my list just because I felt like certain things didn't quite work. Some of the subplots and things that were going on in that movie. But Dee Wallace, her performance is fantastic in it. It's really, really well done. There's no kind of, today I feel like they would do a CGI dog. It's all the real dog. So that was appreciated.
And
And
they
I
say that
thought
to
it
work
was
with kids or dogs, right? And then
right.
they have both in that
It
film. That
is
must have been
both. Right.
torturous.
Exactly. So, but that one was enjoyable. Another one that I liked a little bit better than that one was Carrie, from 1976. Brian De Palma directed that. It's one of his earliest films, and Sissy Spacek does a wonderful job in it. I thought that was a very effective kind of scary movie. So I had to mention that one.
Yeah, on that one too. Have you
Yeah,
seen the remake? Because it's actually really good.
I haven't. I really want to. I want
Yeah,
to.
Chloe Grace Moretz. That's one I was going to
Yes.
mention as an honorable mention, but worth checking out. They're both actually really the original's really good, and so
Yeah.
is the newer one. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I definitely want to watch the remake because I like that actress a lot. So yeah, I'm definitely
yeah,
going to
me
check it
too.
out. Um, Next up, Pet Cemetery. Of course, this is one of these classics that's hailed as one of the best horror movies ever. I thought it was very effective. I thought it was very
Yeah,
well done, very scary. When it starts off, I'm like, okay, it's going to be a pet zombie movie. This is going to be kind of cool, and then it takes a really dark and disturbing turn.
yeah,
And
yeah.
man, yeah, it's definitely effective as a kind of just horrific story. So I enjoyed it. It's not one I'm going to revisit very often, but I definitely found it to be very effective.
Yeah, I'll pile on that a little
Yeah.
bit. Pet Cemetery, boy, yeah, this is the scariest King film to me, and honestly, one of the
Okay.
scariest movies I've seen.
Yeah.
And really, it's because it's just so disturbing. I
Hmm.
mean, it's made very well, as you said, very effective. It's effective for what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. Right.
And I wanted to ask you about this because I got me thinking about horror and the fact that some horror films I don't really like because they're too disturbing, And I wanted to
Yeah.
throw a couple out there like that. Like for instance, Saw. Actually has a great
Mm,
ending, but the movie itself just too disturbing, too much human torture for me to really I can't really enjoy it, you know.
right, right.
I'd put Pet Cemetery in that group. Even
Yeah.
Evil Dead 1 and 2, there's just so
Mm,
much body horror. I like them a
right.
little bit, but it's like it's hard to recommend these movies. You know, it's hard to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you should run out and see Pet Cemetery," but it's really kind of sick and wrong at certain times. So just keep
Yeah.
that in mind, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. It just takes
Uh,
things a little too far for me
but
so
you
that
have
it's
to
like,
kind of for that kind of
right,
to be effective, you have to.
sure, sure. I know what you
So
mean. Yeah,
yeah, and then
but
I was go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I'm just saying, but it is hard to recommend. Like you're saying, it's like hard to
Yeah.
go and just say, yeah, you should check this out. I guess the caveat always is if you're into horror, if you're into these types of movies, you'll probably be fine with it. But a
Yeah.
lot of general audiences probably aren't gonna, it's not gonna sit well with them very much, you
Right,
know?
right.
Yeah.
I got to thinking too, like the movie Us. I mean, that's pretty
Mm,
disturbing at times too,
sure.
but I think I mean, it's one of my favorite horror
Yeah,
movies, you know? So
right.
then I was kind of introspectively thinking, well, why is it that some disturbing things are okay and other ones I'm like, I don't know if I'd recommend that one.
Right.
In some ways that, you know, a lot of these cross the line, if not all of them that are sort of the disturbing type, you know?
Yeah, I think for me when kids get involved, it gets when it gets a little, you're kind of getting into some dangerous territory when you have young, kind of innocent children involved in some of these. But if
Yeah.
it's done right, it can work. It just sometimes
Yeah.
I feel like again they take that slight step too far and they, go to make it a little too disturbing.
I'm glad you said that because that's another thing. I have a few sort of pet peeves about horror movies.
Yeah.
One of them is that the haunted house trope, where you know it's just always
Mm,
like the haunted house is, you know, out to get the people, and it first it starts just with one person and no one believes them, and then it just like it's so
right.
calculating about when it scares, you know,
Uh-huh.
and there's also no rules about how to defeat
Right.
the haunted house. Like those
Hmm.
are frustrating movies for me to watch. There's a couple good ones, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
sure.
But the other thing though is when it's little kids.
Yeah.
I don't know why sometimes they just torture the little kids in the movie. And I'm thinking there's plenty of ways to torture the older, like the grown-ups. Why are we just tormenting these kids? And then I'm
Right.
also then I my mind kind of drifts when in these kind of movies to well like I'm not even okay really with what they're putting that kid actor through necessarily when they're
Yeah.
acting in the film.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
But
It's a
yeah.
fine line. It's a fine line.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you think on set, like their parents are probably standing just off the camera, but still the things that they're having to interact with and do is
Yeah.
just a
And
little
say, yeah.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not too often that I feel that way about film, but
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple examples real quick
Hmm.
here. You know, so these are spoilers in case someone's dying to see these two.
Sure.
One of them is there's a recent one that came out called Cobweb. It's a
Mm,
2023 film,
mm.
and you know, there's this boy is just being tormented. Just it's awful, you know. And then it turns out that the parents are mostly what's tormenting this child. You know, it's
Oh,
just awful what they put this child through.
wow.
So it's really hard to sit through that.
Yeah.
Another one too is Hide and Seek, which
Mm,
actually I think it's 2004. It starred Robert De Niro,
mm.
and the whole movie. And it's like a spoiler, but I don't recommend you see this one. You won't like it. So I could withhold the spoiler if you want. You tell
No, no,
me.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So the whole movie, the child is being tormented. Well, it turns out it's the dad, played by Robert De Niro, this whole time, and then they reveal it at the end. It's like, no, I don't want it to be the dad. That's the one
No.
person he has in his life. What are they
Right.
doing?
Oh no. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that stuff can be hard to watch for sure.
yeah, yeah,
That's why I think that's another reason I'm a little precarious about horrors because sometimes they can go that way and it can be like, oh no, I didn't want it to be that. Sometimes it's really good and it's like, oh, there's kind of like a triumph over evil. But when the evil
yeah,
wins in the end, that kind of doesn't sit right with me. It can work
yeah.
sometimes. There's some movies with like downer endings that
Mm-hmm.
can work, but
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes I'm not a fan of that.
It really is
So
just that fine line, like you said.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is. It's
Did you
hard
have
to
a
hard to
couple more
navigate.
honorable mentions?
Yes, I've got a few I want to. These I'll just kind of go through quickly. Ones I
Mm-hmm.
watched this week. Graveyard Shift I found to be a fun kind of creature feature.
Uh-huh.
Christine is kind of fun. The car that comes alive. Firestarter with Drew
Mm-hmm.
Barrymore I thought was excellent. There's a really fun one with Gary Busey called Silver Bullet. Have you seen that?
Oh, is that the vampire one?
That's the
I
werewolf.
Oh, Werewolf. I've never
Yeah,
actually seen it, but
it's
I'm aware
pretty
of it. Yeah.
fun. It's pretty
Is
fun.
it?
Gary
Okay.
Busey is perfectly cast as like the eccentric uncle of these two
Oh,
kids that have discovered
imagine
this
that.
werewolf.
Yeah.
It's spot on Gary Busey if you're a fan of him. And then these ones up top here, these are some of my favorites. Misery, I found to be a
Mm,
great horror movie. The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken, I
mm,
think
yeah.
was excellent. Children of the Corn, that's another one involving kids, but
Right.
it's
Yeah.
I think done in a way that works somehow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. And then one of his few kind of more sci-fi movies, he does it under a different pen name. I forget the name he
Oh.
uses, but he does a couple of sci-fi movies. The Running Man. This is
Oh,
one I've
right.
watched
Yeah.
several times. This is tons of
Sure.
fun. It's a
It
kind of
is. Yeah.
fun, silly
Ben Richards.
Schwarzenegger action movie from the 80s, but it's
Hmm.
kind of got this undercurrent of like real satire,
Hmm.
like a political commentary to it that really
Definitely.
works, that I think
Definitely.
is really smart. So it's kind of deceptively intelligent, kind of in
Hmm.
where it goes and kind of the storytelling there. So that one I had to mention. And then the last two on my honorable mentions list, the one of these was really hard to cut from my top five, the It movies. So the two
Mm,
recent It movies by Andy Muschietti,
mm.
they're just fantastic. I found the first one to be riveting. The child actors do a fantastic job. And then the second one I just finally watched this week. I hadn't seen it until this week.
Oh.
It was equally good, if not
Hmm.
better than the first one. The cast they got to play the young kids grown up did a fantastic job. James McAvoy's in there, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader, just a great cast. Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård just blew it out of the water. I was blown away by his performance in both of those movies. And they're about characters that you care about. Like
Yeah.
there's
For
just
sure.
such great stories. I
Yeah.
felt that
Yeah.
as well as being great horror movies. So
Yeah.
that's what put those above the rest for me. But they just didn't quite make it in my top five. Maybe because I've seen them too recently. Maybe they need a
Mm.
rewatch. But that's where I was at for my honorable mentions. Do you have any more on yours?
Yeah, and a couple of these are repeats, but Children of the Corn scared me as a child. I mean,
Right.
pretty disturbing too. A lot of these are a lot of these I'll mention real quick are they're just like a 2.5, 3 star. So they're not none of them are great. They're just
Yeah,
sort of like you get something out of it, but they're not
sure.
by no means are they, great films.
Right.
Dreamcatcher was one that I saw in the theater actually way back. It's a
Okay.
bizarre film. Yeah, Firestarter. Gerald's
Mm.
Game was pretty
Oh,
good.
yeah, I
I
haven't
think
seen
that
that
was
yet.
maybe a Netflix movie. I don't know, but
Hmm.
that was decent.
Okay.
Graveyard Shift. In
Yeah.
the Tall Grass was I think a
Oh,
Netflix movie.
okay.
And that one was it was again a 2.5 star film. Cat's Eye is one I mentioned
Oh,
that
yeah.
I still remember from my youth. That even now I can think back when I was watching it, and I was young enough to where I was kind of nervous or scared during it. So that one's pretty good
Yeah,
too.
that one I watched, and that one's
Oh
an anthology film. So it's three short films, kind of
yeah,
linked by this cat who happens to be each one. It's kind of very loosely connected.
right, right.
But I found the first and last stories to be great, and the middle one I didn't
Mm,
care for.
yeah.
So that's what I'll say
Okay.
about that one. I have a review on Letterboxd right now if you want to check it out. But yeah, that one I did watch this week as well.
Yeah. Christine, Creep Show,
Mm.
Cujo. I mean, all ones that I got something out of.
Yeah.
There's one called Needful Things.
Mm.
The original It film, actually, which I think was a 4-hour TV movie, I believe.
Right. Yeah, I still haven't
Even
seen
that
that
one was
one. Yeah.
decent.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
need to
it was
watch that.
decent.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I wanted to comment on three others. One of them is a movie called 1408. Have you heard of this one?
I have. I haven't got to see it yet though. I
Okay.
really want to
Okay.
watch it.
Yeah, again, it's another 3 star film.
Okay.
It's set in a hotel room, and there's like this really great build up to how bad this hotel room is. And
Mm.
John Cusack is a debunker, and so he goes to stay in the hotel room. So it's a great setup. It's a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
better than
yeah.
some of the other honorable mentions.
Sure.
Another one is Hearts in Atlantis,
Mm.
and this is a Anthony Hopkins film, and
Mm.
also starring a young Anton Yelchin,
Oh,
who's really good and
yeah.
underused in Star Trek, and
Yeah.
unfortunately passed away. I think you've probably heard about that.
Yeah.
So some nice performances in this drama.
Mm.
A 3 star film for me, and then we did talk about Pet Cemetery, so it kind of goes too far in some ways, but very effective. So, I mean,
Right,
yeah,
right,
that's my
right.
honorable mentions.
Have you
Yeah.
seen the remake of Pet Cemetery? Just a couple years
Yes,
old.
I did
Oh,
not really think it was as good. Yeah.
oh, really? Okay, okay,
No, no.
interesting.
I,
Gotcha.
I I don't think
Okay,
I hated it, but there's a
right.
lot of corollaries, and I thought this just isn't as good or scary
Okay,
or whatever. Yeah,
gotcha,
it doesn't
gotcha.
follow exactly of the original, but
Mm,
anyway,
hmm.
yeah, I just didn't really prefer it.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. All righty. Well, that's it for honorable mentions, folks. So now it's time to jump into our top five Stephen King movie adaptations. Here we go. Kicking things off is Bert. What do you got at number five?
And number five, I actually have a movie called Cell. Have you heard of this
Oh,
one?
I've heard of it. I have not seen it.
Okay, I'm not going to give away much at all.
Okay.
But this was really, I just watched this for the first time,
Oh,
and it was just an unexpected treat, really,
okay.
is the best way I can put it. It actually, just like 1408, stars John Cusack and Samuel Jackson, has both
Oh,
those guys in it.
hmm.
Yeah, and it's a dystopian film,
Oh,
and it's more of a modern concept, although it was released in 2006.
mm-hmm.
But it's I thought I didn't read anything about it because that's always my preferred method of watching a movie.
Sure.
But I assumed it was about prison because people will
Right.
notice there's sometimes a prison theme going through some of these
Right.
King stories. But no, it's about cell phones. It doesn't really give anything
Oh.
away to say that. So I'll keep it spoiler free. It's a pretty small budget, um,
Mm,
pretty small cast,
mm,
and the film does a really good job of taking kind of an original concept. I don't recall seeing anything like it before, and yet it's a film that I've never heard of, and I've never heard anybody talk about it.
mm.
So I think well worth seeking out. It's not perfect.
Mm.
It's one of those that I have some questions afterward.
Right.
But there's definitely some creepy moments in it. I actually
Okay.
got the shivers a couple times when I was
Oh.
watching it. Where you sort of get
Oh,
that
sure. Yeah.
down your spine.
Right.
Yes, so it's a smaller scale, and it's just
Okay.
a really good horror film and one of the best King adaptations. So that's my number five.
Wow. Excellent. I'll definitely put that on the watch list because I think I ran across it and
Yeah,
I was like, man, that would be interesting to watch. But I think I saw like didn't you say it had kind of lower critic ratings and
I didn't say
um
that.
oh,
It
okay.
may,
Yeah.
but I mean, this trust me, Cell is a step up from a lot
Sure.
of the ones that we've mentioned, frankly.
Sure, sure. Well,
In my opinion, in my
I
opinion.
rarely agree with critics anyway, so that
There you
doesn't
go.
usually turn me off. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It just
I'll
has some
definitely.
really original ideas.
That's
And
cool.
that's why I'm surprised it hasn't really caught on.
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely check it out. Cool. All right. Well, moving on to my number five. It is now considered a horror classic, The Shining, by Stanley Kubrick,
Yeah.
the director extraordinaire from 1980. This was released. Um, by this time, Kubrick was a hugely popular director, had directed several large scale films, big budget movies, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Spartacus, all these big movies. And he dipped his toe into horror here and did so in a way that was just shocking, horrifying. People ask, what's your favorite horror movie? I typically say this because it's just to me the
Really?
scariest, I think.
Hmm.
It's just so the imagery. Kubrick,
Yeah.
he's a master of just setting up shots in a way that no one else does. I don't know how to explain it really. Even
Yeah.
it's just uh, images that stay with you. Very
Mm.
memorable, shots and long takes going down these corridors of this hotel. Um, it's basically all of one location, although it's a fairly large location. It's a big hotel, the
Mm.
Overlook, and it's of course Jack Nicholson is an author who's trying to write a book there, along with his wife and his young son. And a lot of disturbing stuff starts happening.
Yeah.
He kind of starts to lose it. His son has this ability called shining, which is kind of this uh, paranormal ability to commune with the dead and different things like this. So it's got a lot of interesting things going on under the surface. It's a lot about addiction. It's kind of a main theme of the film. The performances are just unnerving. Jack Nicholson just kind of goes all out here. This is probably one of his most iconic roles ever. Shelley Duvall is equally as good. She has a kind of a harder role, I think, because she's kind of playing the normal one as all the craziness is going on around her. And so I feel like she could have easily overplayed it, or underplayed it. That's kind of tends to be what actors
Yeah.
do. But she, I think, really toes the line very well throughout the whole film and kind of grounds it in a way. Of course, Danny Lloyd as Danny Torrance, their young son, does some really great acting here as a young child. I mean, he had to be under 10, I guess, when he did this. And just, again, yeah, some very memorable moments. Scatman Crothers, I think, is excellent. He's cast as Dick Halloran. He does a great job in his role. He's kind of a mentor figure to young Danny, and just does a great job as well. So yeah, it's just one of those movies that stays with you. You know, like I said, it's very memorable. Great use of music, great use of silence as well. Great use of atmosphere, the whole feel of the hotel. It's wintertime outside too, so that gives it a kind of creepy feeling. They can't really go outside, you know, so that kind of adds another layer of kind of horror to the whole thing. And you know, it's got one of those endings that kind of makes you go, "What? What does that mean?" You know, kind of makes you rethink the whole thing in a way. So really effective filmmaking. They actually invented the Steadicam for this movie.
Wow.
That's an invention of this film. The filmmakers and technicians figured out the Steadicam technology, which is a camera that's kind of attached to a person that you can walk around with without it kind of, you know, jostling around. So it's important. And as far as, you know, film history in that way, Steadicams are used on basically every movie set today. So it's important in that way. Again, it's a memorable movie, very very scary, and you know, one that has some interesting themes because obviously it's about a family, but what's kind of going on with each of the family members is unique, and so just a lot there, a lot to unpack in that movie. And so I had to make the list, so I put it in at number 5. Have you seen Shining? What are your thoughts on that one?
Have seen it.
Yeah.
It's yeah, you know what makes it as good as it is the performances
Yeah.
and I on I would say almost all of my top Stephen King films, but also throughout horror, in my opinion, the best ones are not necessarily the scariest, but the ones that get into the characters more and then are
Yeah.
also scary. You know, they're like
Right.
they're a good movie, but on top of that, it just happens to be a horror movie. And so
Exactly.
this is one of those that I would say just accomplishes that really well. I don't know that I love I mean the film's pretty good, you know, and it is
Hmm.
scary at times. It's just
Hmm.
not it's just not one I reach for a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a Kubrick thing, but
Mm.
I don't really necessarily gravitate toward a lot of his work. So if I had to
Gotcha.
give it a star rating, I'm probably at 2.5. You
Okay.
know, but that is
Okay.
a good pick because I mean the character work is really really on point.
Yeah.
I mean there's got to be I don't know thousands if not more references to
Oh
you know
yeah.
Jack Nicholson's lines and him coming through the
Sure.
door with the you know
Yep.
yeah like you said super iconic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, what is your number 4?
Okay, my number 4 is It Chapter 2.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
I'm glad you've seen them. I'll talk a little
Mm.
bit about the differences. First of all, they're both good. They're both 4-star films. So I didn't really want to do you know It Chapter 1 and then later It Chapter 2 or something like that. I just thought I would
Right.
pick one,
Sure.
and I feel like 2 surprisingly has a lot of throwbacks to the original cast, like a lot of
Hmm.
flashbacks, and I
Yep.
really you know like that so much because now we not just get that original cast, but you sort of build on that, and then when they're older, and it's just 2 great casts, you know.
Yeah.
So
Right. Right.
it's kind of like twice the you know performance power.
Right.
And there's a lot more comedy in the second one.
Hmm.
There's almost some Sam Raimi style comedy at times, which is surprising. Which you know I'm wearing this Michigan State shirt in honor of Sam
Oh,
Raimi, I guess for some reason.
nice. Nice. Yeah.
But so there's a lot more comedy. Bill Hader is a very
Mm.
funny guy, you
Yeah.
know. And then what I like is that these movies really have some kind of they have a lot of bigger ideas when they're trying to scare you,
Right.
things that you really don't get a lot of other horror movies. Partly
Mm.
because they have a pretty good budget,
Right.
but um, yeah, just some big scares that I just really haven't seen anywhere else. I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to put it.
Right.
Um, so unfortunately, one of my pet peeves is when you never actually know what it takes to kill the thing, and there's a little
Right.
bit of that going on here.
Mm,
But actually, it does have a kind of a satisfying ending when they sort of figure that out.
right.
And there's some really beautiful shots in this film. I mean, it's shot so well.
It is.
It's about a 5.5 hour, between the two movies.
Right.
Both are really good. A nice score as well.
Mm,
I think if I had, I wouldn't say I picked two because you really got to watch one first, but I think
yeah.
two is just you get just a little more with
Right.
it.
Hmm.
But yeah, just they're both great films. Two maybe is slightly just has more content of good stuff, and yeah, just one of the best horror films on my list too, not just Stephen King films.
Yeah, I've got to totally agree and echo everything you said because yeah, watching the first part probably 2 years ago. It's
Okay.
been a while since I had seen it, and I didn't really have time to watch both. So I was like, well, I haven't seen part two, so I'll just put on part two. And it really did a good job of catching me up and reminding me of everything that happened in part one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, they've got several flashbacks throughout, and it works really well. It's very effective. Like you're talking about before, character wise, just the relationships are at the core of the movie, and
Yeah.
then happens to be a big crazy horror movie on top of that. So yeah, I found it to be superior to the first one, honestly, I thought. And that has a lot to do with getting both casts again, casting the older actors. I mean, they matched up so perfect because you're going back and forth, in the same
Hmm.
scene. I mean, there's
Yeah.
scenes where you literally see the young one and then see the older version, and it's pretty seamless. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
The
they
editing's good.
Yeah, they captured the mannerisms and the
Hmm.
speech patterns and everything. So it's just kudos to the cast, big time on that one. And I'm glad you mentioned Bill Hader because he was the standout to me, even with
Yeah.
Oscar nominated Jessica Chastain and
Hmm.
McAvoy, one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah.
Hader, like he had the comedy, but he had some dramatic moments to play that
Yeah.
he just nailed.
Yeah.
So I was very impressed with him, and I'm a fan of the show Barry, which is his show on
Oh,
HBO,
okay.
which is really a really good show if you haven't checked it
Oh,
out. But
okay.
I'm looking forward to what he does in the future as a director because he directs episodes of that show, and I think he writes some episodes too. So yeah, I'm very very big fan of it. Chapter two, very effective, very well made. Like you said, visually it's stunning, and a lot of CGI in there, but
Mhm.
it didn't take me out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of times CGI will do that for me, and in this one, I felt it worked because it wasn't overused. I didn't feel like they used just CGI all the time. It was used when it was needed, and when it was needed, it was really well done. Did you feel the same way about the effects work?
I did, and I'm glad you brought that up because on top of that, I'm a huge fan of forced perspective shots.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of times where the clown gets really huge or
right.
small, and
Yeah,
how they pulled that off. I mean, I'd love to watch the behind the scenes,
yeah,
because
yeah,
maybe some of it was CGI or maybe it was distance with the camera, but I love that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of it
yeah.
in chapter two.
Definitely, definitely. Great pick. Okay, cool. Moving on to my number four. Taking a sharp turn in another direction. Not a horror film at all. It is Stand By Me.
Mm,
Stand By Me, made back in 1986. This is a film by Rob Reiner, who people will know as the guy who directed movies like Spinal Tap, Princess Bride, Few Good Men. He's kind of dabbled in a lot of different genres and made all kinds of different films. Although his dad, Carl Reiner, is primarily known for comedy.
yeah.
He did a great job with Stand By Me. I think this is one of his earlier films. I think it's the second or third movie he ever made, and it's a very effective coming of age film. Really, is what it is at the heart of it. But it's kind of wrapped in this murder mystery story. The story, I think, the Stephen King book is called The Body, um,
Yeah.
and I'll explain why they retitled it in a second. But it's just a great, film about friendship. These four, young boys who stumble upon this body, this dead body, and they kind of have to uncover the mystery of what happened here. River Phoenix, we all know, gone way too soon. Died tragically young. He's great in this. Will Wheaton, who of course went on to Star Trek and other things. Still working today. He's a great actor. I really like. Um, Corey Feldman, of course, who was hugely popular in the '80s. Big fan of The Goonies and Lost Boys and a lot of other movies he did. And then Jerry O'Connell, who of course is also still working today. Although he looks very different. If you looked at him today and looked at him in this
Yeah.
movie, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the same guy. But they all do just a great job acting. It's the performances are so natural. You could tell that they hung out off set. You could tell that Rob Reiner just really kind of got them together, and there's just a great sense of camaraderie between all of them. This film is very well written, very naturalistic dialogue, and very quotable dialogue as well throughout the film. Good use of music. There's some pop songs in there, including the title song "Stand by Me" by Ben E. King. This was a song that Kiefer Sutherland, who's also in the movie, is great in it. He was teaching River Phoenix how to play it on guitar while they were on set, and Rob Reiner heard them playing it, and he's like, "I haven't heard that song in years. We're gonna retitle the movie. That's the title." And so that's kind of how it got retitled Stand By Me, just kind of by happenstance
Interesting.
there, which is kind of
Wow.
fun. But yeah, it's just a movie I've seen a couple of times. I've really enjoyed it every time I've seen it. I didn't get a chance. I wanted to listen to the commentary on it because we have a commentary here with Rob Reiner, Will Wheaton, and Corey Feldman.
Oh,
So that was, and it's 25 years later, so it's like them looking
oh,
back on it. So that would be fun to listen to. I haven't had a chance to do that
yeah.
yet, but when I do, I'll let you guys know. So yeah, Stand By Me is just a favorite of mine. What do you think of this one, Bert?
Had a little bit of a different read on it.
Okay.
I hadn't seen it in many years, and so I rewatched it. Honestly, I think it's an okay drama. I mean,
Mm,
it succeeds in a lot of ways, like taking us back in time,
right.
showing this actually a lot of King's stories are about a group, like a small knit group of sort of outcasts that
Right.
come together, and this is
Sure.
maybe the quintessential example. But
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I first of all, you should never make Kiefer the bad guy. He's Jack Bauer. He should not. I mean, he wasn't yet,
Right.
but yeah, yeah, I don't know why I felt this way, but at times I felt the acting wasn't always on point.
Mm, okay.
But ultimately, I ended up at about 2 stars. I didn't really enjoy it
Mm,
that much
okay.
for some reason.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Interesting. All right. Alrighty. So that is my number four. Bert, we're now on to your number three. What do you got?
I've got The Mist at number three.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I
I was
had
wondering if
to.
this was going to come up.
Yeah, I love this little monster flick. Yeah, first the variety of monsters. You got every shape
Mm,
and size here.
right.
To me, it's very relatable being set in a grocery store.
Yeah.
I've always thought if something like this happened, you'd want to be like at Costco or something, right?
Right.
And hopefully board up the windows. We talked about this film before. The
Yeah.
ending, it's a stretch. Do I hate it? Kinda. But I like films that take a chance. It's just
Yeah.
maybe a little too far.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, and then I kind of hate what yeah, it is too far. It is too far.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like points for trying to do something different, but take away quite a bit because it's also too far. So
Yeah.
it does have that issue, but it's just to me, I really enjoy it. I know you found the characters annoying. I think it's kind of a good sprinkling of characters. I don't personally
Mm,
find them put like they don't put me off to the film.
mm,
I mean, some of them
hmm.
are just naturally annoying because that's how they're written.
Right.
So and by the way, this is one where I have read the short story, and in the short
Mm.
story, the ending like that does not happen.
Oh.
In the short story, they're driving away from the grocery store, and it just ends.
Oh.
And so there's none of that final scene. So it was
Gotcha.
really the director
Yeah.
reaching there,
Yeah. Right.
and I like that this film also kind of works as sort of like a 50s, you know, monster B movie because there, it has the black and white version on the Blu-ray, and I think and the
Mm,
director has acknowledged that the idea was that this could kind of work for that time period.
right.
And there's some great creature effects. Some are real, great practical puppets, and I think even some of the CG looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just one I've seen so many times, and yeah, sure, it's not perfect. The ending is a pretty big knock, especially for you, I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to put it really high up there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you put it on because it, like you're saying, it is a very effective film, very well made. I really like the way it's shot. Really want to see that black and white version, because I think I would really enjoy that, probably even more. So I'm a big fan of how it's kind of a throwback to like 50s sci-fi B movies, yet it has a modern setting and modern characters. I did find some of them to be quite annoying. Thomas Jane though, he's fantastic. I think that guy needs
Yeah.
more work. I don't know why he
Right.
hasn't like become a big, A-list movie star because he's really good, like on the
Hmm.
emotional stuff, on the action. He can do it all. I like his Punisher movie a lot, more than most people do.
Okay.
So yeah, it's got a lot of points, in its favor, but yeah, that ending, man, that really just threw me for a loop. I just could not get over it. It just, yeah, again, it takes it too far. When you have a kid involved, it's hard to make that work. So, um, yeah, I would probably just, if I watched it again, just stop it as soon as they start driving off in the car, just like the book. And just wouldn't pay attention to that ending. But it's created a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion around it.
That's right.
And
That's
it's
right.
interesting, the director, Frank Darabont directed that. He of
Yeah.
course directed movies that I'm sure we're about to talk about, on this list, which are fantastic. He's a great director. I've liked all of
Well,
his movies, really, except
yeah.
that one.
Right. Well,
Um,
and he had a lot of pull, I think, and I think that's
yes.
why, if it was just a first time director, the studio would be like, no, 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 we're not doing that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious to see, hear a commentary maybe, or figure out it, find an
There is a
interview.
commentary on the disc.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've
And I'm
listened
sure
to
he
about
talks
half of
about
it.
the choice to do that. So I'd be curious to hear
Yeah.
his kind of reasoning. So,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, glad you included it. But no, that would be very low on my list, unfortunately. So,
Gotcha.
well, hey, that's a perfect segue into my number three, which is The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Um, Frank Darabont directed, uh, this film, released in '94, was nominated for 7 Oscars,
Wow.
which is just crazy. The most ever for any Stephen King adaptation. Best Picture, Best Actor for Morgan Freeman, adapted screenplay also for Frank Darabont, who wrote the film as well, wrote the screenplay. Best cinematography, best editing, best sound, best original score, for Thomas Newman. So, critically hailed as a great film. Didn't really make a lot of money at all. Came out between Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump, which was probably the worst place for
Oh,
it to come out, which is why I think it didn't do very well. Obviously, wasn't marketed that well. The title is a little, odd. So I think, there were a lot of things against the movie as far as, making it a kind of, big box office hit. But it's got it where it counts, which is in the story and in the characters. These characters are some of my favorites in movies. Honestly, Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman have never been better. I think these
mm,
performances by these two actors are their best work of their careers, and they've delivered many great performances, but these just stand out. I can't see anyone else in these roles. It's kind of one of those situations.
yeah. Yeah.
So they're both great as the leads. The same goes for Clancy Brown. I think he's wonderful in this. The most hated bad guy in movies, maybe. I mean, he's just a really nasty character. So yeah, I would probably put him among the best movie villains ever. He just plays it so well. It's a great tale of, as the title suggests, redemption for these characters who are, in this prison for years and years and years. I mean, we cover, decades, we go through with these characters. And their relationship, the way it develops, is just so, emotionally engaging, throughout. It's a film with tons of biblical imagery and, references throughout the film, which is something that, I really enjoy about it. Very well shot, edited, very well written. Roger Deakins shot this, so
Oh, wow.
this is a director of photography who's worked for many decades in the industry, and this is, I think, one of the first ones where he really got a lot of notoriety. for the amazing work that he did setting up shots, the way he moves the camera. Just really, really, he's, in my opinion, probably the best cinematographer of all time. I mean, he's directed, he's worked on some of my favorite movies, Blade Runner 2049 recently, all kinds of different films, just the way he lights
Yeah.
things and does things. It's really striking imagery. So that's a huge plus for it. As I mentioned, Thomas Newman's score, I think, is very effective throughout.
Yeah.
Has a lot of great kind of emotional moments, a lot of quieter moments that work very well and kind of support the emotion of what's happening on screen. And the ending is one of my favorites. So going the opposite of the Mist, the ending of this movie is just perfect. There's no better way to end this movie. That final shot is just bliss. I mean, it's great, great stuff. So, yeah, this is a movie that, again, it stays with you, not because it's scary, really, but because of just the characters and what they go through on this journey together. Is just great, great stuff. I was listening to the commentary with Frank Darabont earlier, and it's a lot of interesting insight into kind of what went down on set and how they did everything. So definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it. But that made my number three.
I'm glad you brought that one up. I kind of figured you would. A lot of people love the film. I liked it when I watched it. I didn't get a chance to rewatch it.
Okay.
So I need to again.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it when I saw it. It's just been many years, so I didn't throw it in my top five, but I'm glad you did. But that's two for Frank Darabont, two in
There you
counting.
go. There you go. Absolutely. Yeah. He's a good one. What do you got at your number two, Bert?
My number two is Misery.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah. And speaking of good character pieces, and these two are just sort of unforgettable after you see them in these roles.
Oh yeah.
I might have read this book once upon a time as well,
Okay.
but probably after I saw the movie. And here, to me, this really is a horror. I mean, it's obviously psychological, but it's definitely a horrific movie. And again, it's great. It doesn't have to rely on effects or a haunted house. I mean, they're in a
Right.
house a lot of the time, but it's just a great tale.
Yeah.
Kathy Bates is just, I mean, she won an Oscar for this role, and
Hmm.
when she's full on, in your face, which is like right at the camera, it's
Right.
truly scary. She's
Oh yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Uh, and James Caan, he's kind of a good opposite of her. This is a very
Right.
understated performance.
Right.
And I really enjoy, he's kind of the audience too, because
Right.
you can see sort of that glint in his eye throughout much of the film where he's like, this lady's crazy, that kind of thing. But he can't tell her because he's trying to sort of get one up on her. And
Yes.
it's sort of a great, the way it's strung along, the pacing is so good
Mm.
because there's
Hmm.
just enough little bits to just make the whole thing very compelling.
Yep.
The camera angles are also very creative and effective here,
Yeah.
and there's just some truly horrific things that happen. So I love, small cast,
Hmm.
basic concept,
Hmm.
superbly acted. This is great horror in my opinion, and yeah, my number two film of King's Adaptations.
Excellent selection. Yeah, this is one I was hoping we get to talk a little more about because it, like you're saying, Small Cat reminds me a little of like 10 Cloverfield Lane. It's like one
Yeah.
location,
Yep.
just like two characters, pretty much the whole movie. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just as riveting, like you're saying, throughout the whole film, the way they build the tension,
Yeah.
the way it kind of crescendos at the end. I mean, it's just so well constructed. And this is another Rob Reiner um, film,
I
I
forgot that.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So another flavor of him, going from Stand By Me to
Right.
that. I mean, it's totally different things, and shows you
Yeah.
again Stephen King's ability to write various different kinds of stories. So yeah, that's definitely one that stands out in my mind as being particularly scary and just well executed on every level as a film too. The editing and everything just works so well in that. So yeah, great pick. All righty. So moving on to my number two. This is a sequel. It is called Doctor Sleep. So this is a sequel to The Shining, which came out just a couple years ago in 2019. And it's directed by Mike Flanagan, who's kind of made a big name for himself in the horror genre over the years. He's directed several very popular horror movies. I think he's working on a series right now, if I'm not mistaken. But just a young director who came in, had a great take on the material. This is based on a novel by Stephen King. I wrote it after he wrote The Shining, and it follows young Danny Torrance as he's now an adult and dealing with the trauma of what happened at the Overlook Hotel when he was a young boy, dealing with this, unique mystical power he has. And Ewan McGregor just does a great job playing this role. He's probably in my top 10 favorite working actors right now.
Oh,
I've of course enjoyed him from the Star Wars prequels. That's where I was introduced to him when I was young. But everything he does, I just feel like he's always in it. He's always giving it his all. Even if the movie's not great, he's one of those actors who
yeah,
is
yeah,
always good no matter
yep.
what. So it's a performance that I think really is effective and stays with you because of, again, these things that he's dealing with from his past and what he's dealing with now in the present. It covers a good kind of like 8-year time span of his life. You find him at one place in the beginning of the movie, and then years later he's kind of at a different place. And so it's kind of a big movie. It's 2.5 hours, much like the original Shining movie is. It's a pretty long film that deals with a lot of different characters. Um, this is the rare sequel that lives up to the original. I've got it higher on the list because I do think it's a better movie. From a character point of view, the character development that happens with Danny is just excellent. The supporting cast is equally good. Rebecca Ferguson, one of my favorites from
Oh,
Mission Impossible.
yeah, I
Many
like
people
her.
know her from. She's the villain here.
Oh,
And she just delivers such a charismatic, very driven performance, very, very unique character, great look about her, just very kind of instantly recognizable and iconic what they did with her character. So she's great. Other great actors in it: Cliff Curtis, Bruce Greenwood,
oh, I like
Carl
Greenwood.
Lumbly. I really like him in this. Jacob Tremblay. People know he broke out in that movie The Room with Brie Larson. Kylie Curran is another younger actress who's in it, and Henry Thomas shows up, the guy who plays
Oh,
Elliot in E.T.
yeah.
So that was a fun moment, but it's a great movie that incorporates a lot from the original, The Shining, yet does it in a unique way. Introduces great new characters, just builds on everything that first film did. A lot of similar shot setups. They're kind of recreating some scenes in interesting ways,
Yeah.
and it's just really well done. So I really have to say, I do enjoy it better than more than The Shining. I wouldn't say it's as scary. I would say it's just a better movie. I would say I just enjoy it more as a kind of, like I said, more character focused type film, very psychological, yet still has some very disturbing moments in there as well. It doesn't shy away from that kind of stuff, but it's kind of cool because of the way they're continuing the story. Whereas the first film's more about addiction, this one's more about recovering from that and kind of generational trauma and recovering from that, and finding your way forward past that. So it's just got some great themes to it, great interesting characters that I really like, and again, very well directed and just made technically as well. So yeah, that's one that I've visited a couple times since it was released, and really enjoy it. Have you had a chance to see that one?
Well, here's the thing. I started that film and I
Oh,
got a few minutes into it, and I had the thought I got to go back and watch The Shining
oh
before I watch
yeah,
this,
right.
because isn't there quite a lot of corollary? I mean, not just in
Yeah.
the character, but there's a lot of stuff.
Yes, yes.
And I was
Characters
like,
come back,
mm,
and storylines are, go
yeah,
through. Yeah, yeah. It's very much a
has it been
sequel.
okay? Yeah, because I hadn't seen The Shining in a long time, and I
Right.
thought I'm not really going to enjoy this the way I want to if I don't watch The Shining first.
Sure, sure.
So
That
yeah,
makes sense.
it's yes, the one I definitely want two films I definitely want to watch back to back.
Yeah, yeah. It would make a great double feature. It'd be long, but it would be it would be worth it. Okay, Bert, we're on to your number one Stephen King adaptation. What is it?
Frank Darabont's The Green Mile.
That's my number one.
I wondered. Let's bat this
Yes.
around a little bit, shall we?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So Green Mile was a Best Picture nominee. Um, for Best Writing and Best Sound. I think that was the only two nominations. Um,
Found
yeah.
found here it's had as a adapted screenplay and
Oh,
supporting actor nomination as well
oh,
for
so
Michael Clark
four.
Duncan. Yeah.
Oh, for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I'll talk about the acting first. Yeah,
Sure,
Michael
sure.
Clark Duncan. I mean,
Hmm.
he's wonderful here. He
Yes.
creates this. I've seen him in other movies. He's in Armageddon, and a bunch of other stuff.
Sure.
The Island. But what he creates here, he just really crafts something really special,
Hmm.
and it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And sadly, he passed away several years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's right. Yeah, I did have a note that he was Oscar nominated. By the
Yeah.
way, his first movie role was at age 43.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow. That's
so
surprising.
we didn't get a lot of time with Mr. Duncan, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Percy, the character, I didn't write down Doug Hutchinson.
Mm.
As slimy as any character in movie history. Can we pretty much agree on that?
Right. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
it- David Morse, a very under-recognized actor
Mm.
that I've seen in multiple things,
Yep.
and I always like him.
Me too.
Um, Barry Pepper, another guy who's
Yes.
very good. Very people I think would know that guy by name.
Right.
He was also excellent in The Last Castle, by the way.
Oh.
Um, and then Sam Rockwell. Um, I haven't seen. Was he in First Man?
Moon.
First Moon.
Different Moon movie. It's called
Yeah, I haven't.
Moon. Just called Moon.
Oh, Moon. Okay, I think I
Yeah.
did see. Okay. Anyway, this is probably is at least close to his best work.
Yeah.
Because he's all in on this.
Hmm.
He kind of puts his comedic chops to work, but in a really villainous way,
Right.
But man, yeah, just I think there's so many of these guys that could have also gotten nominated, but you can't give, four nominations for one movie for all
Right.
best supporting actor. Even Michael Jeter, the guy from Sesame Street and Jurassic
Sure.
Park 3. I
Right.
mean, it's the best work I've seen from him by
Yeah.
far,
Hmm.
except that one episode of Sesame Street. But seriously, Harry Dean Stanton,
Yes.
he's really good. James
Hmm.
Cromwell,
Hmm.
William Sadler,
Yeah.
you know, even Dabbs Greer, the Reverend from Little House on the Prairie, is in this.
Right.
And I didn't even mention yet Gary Sinise,
Mm.
and then
Hmm.
a guy, little known guy by the name of Tom Hanks.
Right.
So I just wanted to comment on just the star power here, and all the performances are splendid.
Yeah.
I'll just
Hmm.
start it off with that. But give me some of your thoughts about Green Mile.
Yeah, yeah. The cast is the highlight for me. Like you're saying, it's just every actor is so on point. Um, Another one where you can't really see other actors playing those roles in a way, it's kind of just very special.
Mhm.
So all of that, definitely Duncan is on another level here. Like I've seen him in a lot of, like you were mentioning, kind of he's usually like a comedic relief almost, like in most
Yeah,
movies I've
yeah.
seen him in. So it's just such a departure for
Mhm.
him to play this role. There's something about when a man that large cries that hits different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
Like
really
if he can
just
cry, maybe I can
right,
cry.
exactly. So yeah, he's very again very special. I feel like it's the only way I know to describe it. And Hanks, of course, is fantastic as always. But having him play off these other characters
Yeah.
is what to me just elevates it. They've said that many times, like actors talk about they want to work with other great actors because it makes them better, and
Hmm.
I feel like that's what's happening here. Everyone's kind of playing off Hanks, who's, at this point in his career, at the top of his game, coming off Saving Private Ryan and Forrest Gump. So I feel like that kind of elevates everyone else, in a way. Um, so yeah, all of them are great. Darabont, he really, I think, just stepped it up from what he did in Shawshank, which is crazy to say because that's such a
Yeah.
great movie. But their performances here are just kind of all ratcheted up a little bit more. I feel like his directing style of what he's doing with the camera and the editing. It's another long movie that doesn't feel long. It's one of
Right.
those for me
Right.
that just kind of breezes by because you're so invested in what's happening. They're dealing with such heavy themes here
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
So it's not a movie I visit often, but it's one that is very uh, impactful and just meaningful. It's full of purpose. I feel like this movie. It's all about life and death and the law and miracles,
yeah,
the nature of truth. All of these things are explored in very effective ways, all through character and relationship. So that's the key here. It's a movie that again I've only seen it I think twice, and so it's again not one I watch often because it's just so kind of it so affects you. I feel like in a way that it's almost hard to watch. You could say.
yeah. At times.
Again, not a horror movie, but it's definitely got some scary stuff in it. It's almost more scary because it's more grounded and real,
Exactly. Yeah.
which I think is why it's maybe so effective. So yeah, just a great movie on every level. Has everything you could want in a good movie. And the performances to me are just kind of what stands out for this one for me. You have any more thoughts on it?
Yeah, the electric chair, it's fairly barbaric,
Yeah.
and so that's one of the reasons why this is so, I guess, disconcerting. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not even saying it's the wrong punishment for a lot of those people that are, in that spot for a reason.
Sure, sure.
Um, I wanted to say too, I sort of like the sci-fi-ish element of the film here,
Right.
and there's also some really great shot setups. Some,
Mm,
I noticed this, and when you see some really great ones where the director puts in that extra effort,
yeah.
it has to be brought up, and there's a few of them in this one. I
Right.
want. I had kind of a miscellaneous thought too. At one point, David Morse's character says to Percy, "What happens on the mile stays on the mile." Now, this is back in '99, I think.
Yeah. Right.
So, is that where the phrase "What happens in Vegas" came from?
I don't know if that predates that or not. I'm not
Yeah,
sure. That's a good point.
because
It
when
could have come from this movie. I don't know.
right, because when I rewatched it, I thought, "Oh, well, that they're taking that," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, no!" But this came before. I think people were saying that phrase, so
It
this
could
might be the origination
it
of
could
that.
be. It could be. I don't know where that came from. That's a good point.
Yeah, but the wrongly accused part of it just pulls you in so much
Yeah.
because and then the way they sort of move around that issue and deal with it is fulfilling, kind of heartbreaking, but yeah, just a amazing drama, this
Yeah.
film.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Glad it was our agreed number one. That's pretty rare that that happens. So
Kind of
that was
is.
that was
Yeah.
pretty cool
Yeah.
that that ended up working out that way. And we had, I think all of our other ones were pretty different. So that's great. It's a cool top five there. I like that. Well, that's it, folks. That is it for episode 66, our favorite Stephen King adaptations. Let us know your top five Stephen King adaptations in the comments below. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. Thanks again, Bert, for joining me.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks again, everybody. We will see you next time right here on The Real World.